All right, let's dive in. Today we're going to be exploring a pretty complex historical narrative.
That's exciting.
It is. It is. And we're going to be uncovering some surprising connections, between events that might seem totally separate at first.
Right.
We're going to start with Christopher Columbus.
Okay.
You probably know him as like the discoverer, right?
Yeah.
But what's often overlooked is this like intense religious zeal that he had, this burning desire to kind of like fulfill biblical prophecy.
Oh, yeah, that's a great place to start. You know, what's so intriguing about Columbus is that these voyages weren't simply about exploring new lands or even seeking riches. They were deeply entwined with this grand vision of reclaiming Jerusalem for Christendom, which was huge in Europe at that time.
So it was way more than just finding a new sea route to the east.
Exactly.
It was like this religiously motivated mission almost.
It was. And, you know, we actually have direct evidence of this in Columbus's own writing, his Book of Prophecies. And his writings, they just lay bare this profound belief that he was, like, chosen by God to play a crucial role in salvation history.
Wow.
And here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
Columbus actively sought the Vatican's blessing for his expeditions.
He wanted the Pope's approval.
He did. He corresponded with Pope Alexander VI.
Really?
Yeah. And strategically emphasized like the religious dimension of his voyages.
Oh, wow.
You know, and after Columbus's discoveries, the church issued these papal bulls.
Yeah.
Like the Intercetera,
Okay.
which granted Spain and Portugal dominion over these new lands.
Wow, so they had like the church's backing, basically.
They did. It was a way of legitimizing their claims and promoting the spread of Christianity.
Interesting.
You know, and this whole pattern really echoes the church's earlier support for the Crusades.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like we're seeing a blueprint for European expansion, you know,
Yeah.
driven by a mix of religious fervor and let's be honest, good old-fashioned ambition.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's crucial to remember that the Spanish monarchy in particular saw the New World as like this incredible source of wealth and power.
Absolutely.
The resources that they were extracting from the Americas, I mean, ultimately fueled their campaigns,
Yes.
including those against Islamic states.
Absolutely. That's important to remember.
So Columbus's voyages weren't just about discovery.
No.
They had these like massive ripple effects that kind of like shaped the balance of power in Europe.
Oh, yeah?
And like far beyond.
For sure. For centuries to come.
You know, it's amazing how these seemingly separate events are actually connected by these powerful underlying forces.
Right.
And speaking of connections,
Yeah.
there are some fascinating parallels between Columbus and the Puritan settlers
Right.
who came to America a bit later, right?
Yes.
Both groups crossed the Atlantic with this like sense of divine mission, a belief that they were chosen people.
Yeah. The similarities are striking. Both Columbus and the Puritans, they believed that they were divinely ordained to establish these new societies in the New World.
Oh.
You know, societies that would become beacons of righteousness. Think of John Winthrop's famous City Upon a Hill sermon.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the Puritans saw themselves as the new Israelites, establishing a promised land in America.
And that idea of a city upon a hill, I mean, that has resonated throughout like all of American history.
Oh, it has.
Isn't it?
It's this powerful vision of America as a divinely favored nation.
It's a powerful idea.
It is. And it's important to acknowledge that the sense of divine destiny, it really laid the groundwork for what we know as manifest destiny.
Right.
This belief that Americans were destined to expand across the continent,
Yeah.
guided by providence. You know, it's this potent narrative that continues to influence American identity and even its foreign policy today.
It's a lot to unpack there.
It is.
But you know, this raises some tough questions too, especially when we think about the impact of these beliefs on the indigenous populations that they encountered.
Yeah, for sure.
Can we talk about the idea of settler colonialism a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. That's a crucial concept for understanding the shared patterns that we see in both American and Israeli history.
Right.
Essentially, settler colonialism describes a process where a foreign group arrives in a new land and establishes permanent settlements with the intention of displacing the existing population and claiming the territory as their own.
So we're not just talking about exploration or even conquest in like the traditional sense.
Right.
We're talking about a specific type of colonization.
Yes.
Where the goal is to replace the original inhabitants with a new society.
Exactly. And in both the American and Israeli contexts, we see this pattern playing out,
Yeah.
often justified through these narratives of divine mandate and historical destiny.
It's like they're using these religious narratives to sort of create a sense of legitimacy for their actions,
You've hit on a crucial point.
even though they involve displacing existing populations.
These narratives, whether based on biblical prophecy or manifest destiny, often serve to justify actions that might otherwise be seen as, morally questionable.
Right, right.
And it's not just about justification. We also see similar practices in both cases.
Yeah.
Appropriation of land, a frontier mentality, the establishment of exclusive communities.
So while there are obviously differences between these historical events,
Yeah.
the parallels in terms of settler colonialism are pretty striking.
They are indeed. And by examining these parallels, we
Yeah.
gain a deeper understanding of the power dynamics,
Right.
the justifications used, and the
Yeah.
long-term consequences of settler colonialism.
Right.
It's a complex
Yeah.
and often uncomfortable part of history.
Absolutely.
But it's essential to grapple with it
Yeah.
if we want to understand the world we live in today.
I totally agree. It's incredible how digging into these historical parallels can really shed light on power dynamics that are still relevant today.
Oh, absolutely.
But before we move on, I kind of want to shift gears for a second
Okay.
and talk about something that might seem totally unrelated at first glance.
Right.
Finance
Okay.
and revolution.
Interesting.
Have you ever heard of Adam Weishaupt and the Bavarian Illuminati?
Ah, yes. Weishaupt and the Illuminati, they're often relegated to the realm of conspiracy theories.
Right.
But their historical significance goes, way beyond that.
Totally.
They were all about challenging traditional hierarchies,
Yeah.
and pushing for radical social change.
They were like the original disruptors.
That's a great way to put it. They were operating during a time of immense intellectual and social upheaval.
Right.
And it's during this period that we see the rise of the Rothschilds,
Okay.
a prominent banking family with vast financial networks across Europe.
Hold on. Are we about to delve into some Rothschild conspiracy theories here?
Not exactly, but it's important to understand that some historical narratives link the Rothschilds to various revolutionary movements, suggesting that their financial influence played a role in kind of destabilizing the old order.
Interesting.
Whether their involvement was intentional or simply a byproduct of their financial activities, that's still debated by historians.
Right. So how does this tie into the larger story we've been discussing?
Well, the French Revolution, with its dramatic overthrow of the monarchy, it created the political landscape for Napoleon Bonaparte's rise to power.
Okay.
And Napoleon, as you know, is a major force for change in Europe.
Yeah, he certainly wasn't afraid to shake things up.
And here's a pivotal moment that kind of connects back to our earlier discussion about religion and geopolitics.
Okay.
In 1799, Napoleon issued this proclamation inviting the Jews of Europe to reclaim Palestine as their rightful heritage.
Wow, that's a huge turning point.
It was.
I mean, for centuries, the idea of a Jewish return to their ancient homeland had been largely a religious aspiration.
Right.
And now is being endorsed by major European power.
It was a watershed moment for the modern Zionist narrative. Napoleon's proclamation kind of injected this new sense of possibility into the Zionist movement
Okay.
and set the stage for political and diplomatic efforts to establish a Jewish state in Palestine.
This is where the Rothschilds come back into the picture, right?
Yeah, potentially.
Weren't they involved in supporting the Zionist movement financially?
Their role is complex and often exaggerated.
Right.
But their financial expertise is said to have played a role in both funding various movements and supporting subsequent state-building efforts.
Interesting.
It's another example of how economic power and ideology can intertwine to shape historical events.
So we're seeing how financial power, revolutionary ideals, and the aspirations of the Jewish people all kind of converged during this period.
Yeah.
Ultimately setting the stage for the establishment of the modern state of Israel in the 20th century.
And it's crucial to remember that this convergence didn't happen in a vacuum.
Right.
It was shaped by centuries of religious narratives, political maneuvering, and shifting power dynamics in Europe and the Middle East.
Speaking of religious narratives, we can't ignore the role of Christian Zionism in all of this.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's this belief system that's been brewing for centuries,
It has.
with its roots going all the way back to Columbus and the Puritans.
That's right. Those early explorers and settlers viewed their missions through a distinctly biblical lens.
Right.
seeing themselves as fulfilling God's plan for humanity.
Wow.
And that sense of divine destiny really laid the groundwork for what would eventually become a powerful political force, Christian Zionism.
So how did these early expressions of Christian Zionism evolve into the movement we see today?
Well,
I mean, groups like Christians United for Israel, CUFI.
yeah.
I mean, they wield a lot of political influence, particularly in the United States.
They do. American exceptionalism, which itself is rooted in Puritan beliefs, played a significant role.
Okay.
The idea of America as a new Israel, a nation chosen by God to play a special role in world events, it became deeply embedded in American culture and politics.
So it's not just like a fringe religious belief anymore.
Yeah.
It's become intertwined with American identity and foreign policy.
Precisely. And figures like John Hagee and organizations like CUFI,
Right.
they've been incredibly influential in promoting the idea that America's destiny is intertwined with Israel's.
Wow.
They argue that supporting Israel is not just a political choice, but a moral and religious imperative.
It's fascinating, but also kind of unsettling to see how these religious beliefs can be translated into concrete political action.
It is.
And it brings us back to that question of the Vatican's enduring influence throughout all of this.
Yeah.
From endorsing Columbus's voyages to shaping modern-day Christian Zionism. I mean, the Catholic Church has been a constant presence in this historical narrative.
It's true. The Vatican's involvement really highlights the long-standing role of the Church in shaping narratives about exploration, conquest, and the Middle East.
Yeah.
Remember how Columbus actively sought papal approval for his expeditions?
Right.
It wasn't just about funding. It was about legitimacy.
Right.
About aligning his mission with the broader goals of the Church.
And that same interplay between religious authority and geopolitical ambitions, I mean, it continues today, doesn't it?
It does.
The Vatican's stance on Israel, for example.
Yeah.
It's this complex mix of theological interpretations and political considerations.
It is indeed. And it's a reminder that religious institutions aren't simply spiritual entities. They're also powerful players on the world stage, shaping policies and influencing events in profound ways.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
I mean, we've gone from Columbus to the Puritans, from the French Revolution to the Rothschilds, and the rise of Christian Zionism.
It's a lot.
It's almost overwhelming to see how all these threads are interconnected, spanning centuries and continents.
It's a testament to the complexity of history and the enduring power of ideas.
So what does this all mean? What are the key takeaways from all of this?
I think the most important takeaway is that seemingly disparate historical events are often interconnected in surprising ways. We can't understand the present without understanding the past.
Right.
And that means recognizing the enduring power of narratives, beliefs, and ideologies.
It's a reminder that history isn't just a collection of facts and dates.
Right.
It's a living, breathing force that continues to shape our world.
And by engaging with history in a critical and thoughtful way, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the challenges we face today.
Man, it's mind-blowing to realize just how deeply intertwined all these seemingly like separate historical events actually are.
I know, right?
I mean, we've uncovered connections that link Christopher Columbus to the Puritans, the French Revolution, even to modern-day Israel.
Yeah, and it all just highlights how religious beliefs and economic interests and these geopolitical ambitions, they've always been like shaping forces throughout history, often operating in ways that we might not immediately recognize, you know?
You know, one of the things that really struck me was how the wealth extracted from the Americas fueled European campaigns against Islamic nations for centuries.
Yeah.
It creates this direct link between colonialism and religious conflict.
Oh, yeah.
A link that continues to resonate today.
Absolutely. That's a crucial insight.
Yeah.
It challenges the notion that religious conflicts are solely driven by theological differences.
Right.
You know, we have to consider the economic and political forces at play, especially when it comes to powerful nations seeking to exert their influence on the world stage.
And it makes you think about America's current involvement in the Middle East, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, is it driven solely by strategic interests?
Right.
Or are there these deeper historical and ideological currents at play?
It's certainly a complex issue.
It is.
But it's worth considering how the idea of America as a new Israel, a nation chosen by God to play this special role in world events, continues to influence American foreign policy. You know, we can see echoes of this in initiatives like the Abraham Accords, which some argue are attempts to reshape the Middle East in ways that align with both strategic interests and theological narratives.
It's fascinating to trace these threads back through history, to see how events that might seem isolated are actually part of this larger tapestry.
Right.
From Columbus's voyages to the Puritans' vision of a promised land, to the parallels between American and Israeli settlers.
Right.
It becomes clear that the interplay of faith and power and wealth has shaped history.
Oh, it has.
In these profound and often unsettling ways.
It's a sobering reminder that history is not just a collection of stories.
Yeah.
It's a living force that continues to shape our world.
So if we were to distill all of this into a single takeaway, what would it be? What's the one thing you'd want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the most crucial takeaway is that we must cultivate this sense of historical awareness. It's not enough to simply memorize dates and names. We have to recognize that the past is not just a collection of stories, but a living force that continues to shape our present.
And that understanding those historical connections, those deeper currents that have shaped the world we live in.
Right.
I mean, that can help us make more informed decisions about the future.
Exactly. It's about recognizing patterns, understanding motivations, and questioning assumptions.
Yeah.
By engaging with history in a critical and thoughtful way, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the complex challenges that we face today.
This has been an incredibly thought-provoking deep dive. I feel like we peeled back layers of history to reveal these hidden connections that have been operating for centuries.
It's been a pleasure exploring these connections with you.
And to our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this journey.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Remember, history isn't just about the past. It's about understanding the forces that continue to shape our world today.